The abandoned railway tunnel stretched into darkness beneath the Nevada mountains, its rusted tracks gleaming like blood in Maya's flashlight beam. Behind them, the corporate hit squad's helicopters thundered closer, their searchlights carving through the desert night. Maya grabbed her brother's hand and pulled him toward the freight train that sat mysteriously idle on tracks that weren't supposed to exist. What they didn't know was that Maya Chen wasn't just another software engineer on the run. She was former NSA, trained in black ops, before she discovered her company was selling surveillance tech to human traffickers. Now, as the train's ancient engine coughed to life under her expert hands, she realized this wasn't salvation, it was a trap. The tracks descended deeper underground than any map showed, past blast doors marked with symbols that made her blood freeze. Through the grimy windows, she glimpsed laboratories, holding cells, and something that looked like an operating theater. People in white coats moved between chambers filled with floating bodies. The train was slowing down. They were expected. But why had someone wanted them to find this place? "Maya, what is this?" David's voice cracked as he pressed his face against the window. At 19, he'd never seen anything like the sterile corridors sliding past them, lit by harsh fluorescent strips that made everything appear sickly and wrong. She couldn't answer. Her training kicked in, cataloging details her civilian brother couldn't process. The facility was massive, carved from solid rock, with ventilation systems that suggested it could sustain hundreds of people indefinitely. The symbols on the blast doors weren't random. They were classification markers she'd seen in classified briefings, the kind that meant projects so black they didn't officially exist. The train shuddered to a halt at what could only be called a platform, though no passenger service had ever been intended here. Through the windshield, Maya watched figures emerge from doorways she hadn't noticed. Not the white-coated technicians they'd glimpsed deeper in the facility, but security personnel in tactical gear. "We need to move," she whispered, checking the pistol tucked beneath her jacket. 3 shots left. David carried nothing but a laptop bag containing the encrypted files that had started this nightmare. The platform was quiet except for the hiss of hydraulics and the distant hum of machinery. No commands shouted, no weapons drawn. The security team simply waited, arranged in a loose semicircle around the train's exit points. Professional, patient. Maya's mind raced through possibilities. The corporate hit squad above ground had been sloppy, desperate. Hired muscle with good equipment but poor discipline. This was different. Military precision. Government funding. "Ma'am," the voice came from outside, amplified but not threatening. "Please exit the vehicle. You're expected in conference room 7. Expected. Not captured, not detained. Expected." David looked at her with wide eyes. "They know who we are." "Worse," Maya muttered, studying the tactical positions through the grimy windows. "They've been waiting for us specifically." The helicopter sounds had faded completely. Either the corporate team had lost their trail at the tunnel entrance, or something had made them stop looking. In Maya's experience, the kind of men who'd been hunting them didn't give up easily unless someone with serious authority told them to back off. She made her decision. 3 bullets wouldn't get them through a facility this size, and the train's engine was already cooling down. Whatever had guided them here, luck, manipulation, or something worse, had eliminated their other options. "Stay close," she told David, moving toward the train car's side door. "Don't touch anything, don't look directly at anyone, and if I tell you to run, you run." The platform felt larger once they stepped onto it, with ceilings that disappeared into shadows above industrial lighting. The air carried a chemical smell she couldn't identify, antiseptic but wrong somehow, like a hospital where the wrong kinds of healing took place. The security team maintained their positions as a single figure approached, middle-aged, unremarkable in the way that suggested extensive training in being forgettable. Government-issue suit, government-issue smile. "Miss Chen, Mr. Chen." He nodded to each of them. "I'm Deputy Director Harrison. We apologize for the unconventional arrival, but your situation above ground required immediate intervention." "Our situation," Maya repeated carefully, was being hunted by corporate assassins because of what we found in Nexus Technologies' server farms. Yes, human trafficking routes optimized by artificial intelligence, surveillance systems sold to criminal organizations. We're quite familiar with your discovery. Harrison's expression didn't change. What you may not realize is that Nexus Technologies was a front operation. The real question is what they were fronting for and why certain people wanted you to find that specific information. David stepped closer to his sister. You're saying we were set up? I'm saying, Harrison replied, gesturing toward a corridor that stretched deeper into the mountain, that someone has been very carefully arranging your escape route. The question we need to answer together is whether they intended to save you or deliver you. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting everything in harsh relief as Maya realized their flight from one nightmare had delivered them into something infinitely more complex. The ancient locomotive shuddered to life with a mechanical wheeze that sounded like the last breath of a dying beast. Maya's hands trembled as she worked the unfamiliar controls, muscle memory from her father's weekend hobby finally proving useful. Steam hissed from joints that hadn't been properly maintained in years, and the smell of burning oil filled the cramped engineer's cabin. "How long since you've done this?" Ethan shouted over the grinding of metal against metal as the wheels began their reluctant turn. 15 years, maybe more. Maya pulled the throttle lever, and the train lurched forward with enough force to knock them both against the control panel. Dad used to restore old engines. Never thought I'd need to actually. A sharp crack of gunfire cut through the engine noise. Behind them, muzzle flashes lit up the rail yard like deadly fireflies. Maya caught a glimpse of black-clad figures sprinting between the abandoned cars, their movements too coordinated to be anything but professional. "Nexus Corp doesn't give up easy," Ethan muttered, checking the clip in his pistol. 3 rounds left. How fast can this thing go? Fast enough. Maya hoped she sounded more confident than she felt. The speedometer needle climbed past 20, then 30 miles per hour. Not exactly highway speeds, but the old freight line cut straight through the industrial district where cars couldn't follow. Question is, where are we going? Ethan pulled a crumpled map from his jacket pocket, the same one he'd been studying when the assassins found their safe house. There's a junction about 40 miles northeast. We can abandon the train there, steal a car, disappear into the mountains. Maya nodded, though something nagged at her about the map's faded markings. The freight line they were following seemed to extend far beyond the junction, snaking into territory that should have been national forest. But the immediate problem was staying alive long enough to worry about geography. The train gathered momentum as it left the rail yard, ancient wheels finding their rhythm on tracks that seemed surprisingly well maintained for an abandoned line. Maya had expected rust and gaps that would send them tumbling into ravines, but the steel rails gleamed dully in the moonlight, recently cleaned of debris. "Tell me again why they want us dead," she said, though she already knew the answer would be incomplete. Ethan had been feeding her half-truths since the moment he'd appeared at her apartment 3 days ago, bleeding and desperate. "You accessed the wrong server. Found files that prove Nexus has been manipulating federal contracts for years, billions in illegal profits." He stared out the side window, watching the industrial landscape blur past. "You're the only one who can verify the authentication keys. There's more to it than corporate fraud." Maya kept her eyes on the track ahead, where her headlight carved a narrow tunnel through the darkness. Nobody deploys military-grade assassination teams over accounting irregularities. Ethan's silence confirmed her suspicions. Whatever he'd discovered in those Nexus files went deeper than simple corruption, the kind of secret that made people disappear permanently. The train rounded a gentle curve, and Maya noticed something odd about the track ahead. Signals that should have been dark and broken were glowing a soft amber, as if someone was still maintaining the electrical systems. Fresh ballast stones lined the roadbed, and the crosstees looked recently replaced. "Ethan, look at this." She pointed to a mile marker post that flashed past. "This line isn't abandoned. Someone's been keeping it operational." He leaned forward, studying the infrastructure with growing concern. That's impossible. The freight company went bankrupt 5 years ago. These tracks should be decommissioned. Another signal light appeared ahead, switching from amber to green as they approached. Maya felt a chill that had nothing to do with the night air flowing through the cabin's broken windows. The signal timing was too precise, as if their train's approach was being tracked and anticipated. "We need to stop," she said, reaching for the brake lever. Ethan grabbed her wrist. "Not yet. Those assassins might still be following on roads parallel to the track. We put more distance between us first. Don't you understand? This whole line is being monitored. We're not escaping. We're being funneled somewhere." Maya tried to pull free, but his grip tightened. "Let go of me. Trust me a little longer." His voice carried an edge she hadn't heard before. "I know more about this than I've told you." The admission hung between them like a loaded gun. Maya stared at his reflection in the side window, seeing him clearly for the first time. The desperate fugitive who'd begged for her help was gone, replaced by someone calculating and purposeful. "Who are you really?" she whispered. Before he could answer, a new set of lights appeared in the distance. Not signal lights this time, but the harsh glare of spotlights mounted on towers that rose from the forest like mechanical trees. Whatever waited at the end of this track, they were almost there. The freight train's wheels screamed against rusted rails as Maya fought with the ancient controls. Warning lights blinked red across the dashboard, casting hellish shadows in the cramped engineer's cabin. Through the cracked windshield, she could see nothing but darkness ahead. No station lights, no crossing signals, just an endless tunnel of black. "How much fuel do we have?" Ethan called from behind her, still clutching the briefcase that had made them both targets. Maya squinted at the gauges. Half the instruments were dead, their needles frozen in positions that meant nothing. Hard to tell. Maybe enough to get us another 50 miles. That's not far enough. Ethan moved closer, his face pale in the red glow. "Nexus Corporation has tracking stations every 30 miles along the main routes. They'll triangulate our position and—" "Then we better hope these aren't main routes." Maya pulled a lever, feeling the train's momentum shift slightly. The squealing intensified. "When was the last time you saw a mile marker?" Ethan fell silent. Maya knew he was thinking the same thing she was. They hadn't seen any infrastructure for the past hour. No crossing gates, no maintenance sheds, no signs of civilization at all. The GPS in the cabin had lost signal shortly after they'd entered what looked like a mountain pass, leaving them navigating blind through terrain that didn't match any of the rail maps they'd found. The train rounded a curve, and Maya caught a glimpse of something that made her heart skip. Lights. Faint and distant, but definitely artificial. "There," she pointed. "Settlement ahead." But as they drew closer, the lights revealed themselves to be something else entirely. A massive concrete wall stretched across their path, easily 40 feet high and topped with razor wire. The rails led directly into a tunnel mouth cut through the barrier. Above the entrance, barely visible flood lamps illuminated a weathered sign. "Authorized personnel only. Department of Memory Security." "Memory Security," Ethan read aloud. "I've never heard of that department." Maya's hands moved instinctively to the brake controls, but then she heard it, the distant thrum of helicopter rotors echoing off the canyon walls behind them. Nexus had found their trail. "We can't stop," she said, making the decision that would change everything. "Whatever's in there, it's better than what's behind us." The train plunged into the tunnel, and motion sensors triggered a sequence of overhead lights that revealed the passage stretching ahead for what looked like miles. The walls were smooth concrete, interrupted at regular intervals by heavy steel doors marked with numbers and symbols Maya didn't recognize. "This isn't a government facility," Ethan whispered, studying the architecture. "Look at the construction. This is old, really old. Some of these techniques, they stopped using poured concrete like this in the 1960s. The tunnel began to slope downward, and Maya realized they were descending deep underground. The air grew colder, carrying strange chemical odors that made her nose burn. Emergency lighting cast everything in an amber glow that seemed to swallow shadows. After 20 minutes of descent, the tunnel opened into a vast underground chamber. Maya's breath caught in her throat. Spread out before them was an entire subterranean complex, dozens of buildings connected by covered walkways, all carved from the living rock. Massive ventilation shafts disappeared into the darkness above, and she could see what looked like an entire fleet of vehicles parked in orderly rows beside the buildings. The rails continued straight through the middle of it all, heading toward a structure that dwarfed everything else, a dome-shaped building easily the size of an aircraft hangar. As they approached, Maya could see people in white coats moving between the various facilities, going about their business, as if a runaway freight train was the most normal thing in the world. "They're expecting us," Ethan said, his voice tight with fear. He was right. As the train began to slow, Maya hadn't touched the brakes. Figures in military uniforms emerged from the buildings. They moved with practiced efficiency, taking positions along the rails. None of them seemed surprised. None of them seemed alarmed. How is that possible? Maya fought with controls that no longer responded to her input. We didn't even know this place existed. The train came to a smooth stop beside a platform that rose from the chamber floor. Through the cabin windows, Maya could see soldiers surrounding them, but their weapons remained lowered, waiting, patient. A woman in a crisp military uniform approached the cabin door. She was middle-aged, with steel-grey hair, and the kind of bearing that suggested she'd spent decades giving orders that were never questioned. When she spoke, her voice carried clearly through the reinforced glass. "Dr. Chen, Mr. Reeves, welcome to Facility 7. We've been expecting you for quite some time." She smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "My name is Colonel Morrison. I believe you have something that belongs to us." Ethan's grip tightened on the briefcase, and Maya felt the last of her hope drain away. The locomotive's headlight cut through the darkness like a dying star, illuminating rusted rails that stretched into an endless void. Maya pressed her face against the grimy window of the freight car, watching the landscape blur past in shades of grey and black. The rhythmic clacking of wheels on tracks had become a hypnotic mantra, but it couldn't drown out the questions hammering in her skull. "How long have we been moving?" she called over the mechanical symphony. Jake consulted the cracked face of his watch, squinting in the dim light filtering through gaps in the car's walls. 3 hours, maybe 4. Hard to tell without landmarks. Maya turned from the window, studying their makeshift sanctuary. The freight car reeked of rust and decay, its walls scarred with decades of neglect. Whoever had abandoned this train had left it to rot, yet the engine still ran with surprising efficiency. Too efficient for something supposedly derelict. "This doesn't feel right," she said, voicing the unease that had been building since they'd climbed aboard. "When's the last time you saw an abandoned train with a full tank of fuel?" Jake was examining something near the car's far corner, his movements careful and deliberate. "Come look at this." She picked her way across the swaying floor, avoiding scattered debris and pools of stagnant water. Jake knelt beside what looked like a maintenance panel, its metal surface cleaner than everything around it. Fresh scratches marked the screws, and the paint showed no signs of the pervasive rust coating the rest of the car. "Someone's been maintaining this," he said, running his fingers along the panel's edges. "Recently." Maya's blood chilled. "We need to stop this train." "With what?" Jake gestured around the empty car. "No emergency brake, no way to reach the engine. We're passengers now, whether we like it or not." The train began to slow, as if responding to their conversation. The rhythmic clacking grew more pronounced, echoing off invisible walls that suggested they were passing through some kind of tunnel or canyon. Maya pressed her eye to a gap in the wall, trying to see outside, but the darkness was absolute. "Jake." Her voice came out as a whisper. "I think we're underground." The train shuddered to a complete stop. the sudden silence more unnerving than the mechanical noise had been. Emergency lighting flickered to life along the car's ceiling, lights that definitely hadn't been there when they'd climbed aboard. Red strobes painted everything in hellish hues, and somewhere in the distance an alarm began to wail. "Attention passengers," a voice crackled through hidden speakers, distorted but unmistakably human. "Please remain calm and follow the lighted pathway to Processing Station 7. Any attempt to deviate from the designated route will result in immediate termination." Maya grabbed Jake's arm. "Tell me you have a plan." Before he could answer, the freight car's massive doors ground open on both sides, revealing a platform bathed in harsh fluorescent light. Men in black tactical gear waited outside, their faces hidden behind reflective visors, weapons raised but not yet aimed. Behind them, Maya could see the sterile white walls of what looked like a medical facility, all gleaming surfaces and unmarked doors. "Processing Station 7, one of the guards repeated, his voice mechanical through the helmet's speaker. "Move." Jake's hand found the small of Maya's back, a gesture that might have looked like compliance but felt like preparation. She recognized the tension in his muscles, the way his weight shifted to the balls of his feet. Whatever he was planning, it would happen fast. "You know what this place is?" she whispered. "I've heard rumors," he replied, eyes never leaving the guards. "Black site. Off the books, off the map. People go in, but they don't come out. Not as themselves, anyway." The guard stepped closer, his weapon now clearly aimed at Maya's chest. "I won't ask again." Maya studied the platform's layout, counting exits and obstacles. 7 guards visible, probably more out of sight. The fluorescent lights created harsh shadows that might provide cover, and she could see what looked like a service corridor beyond the main entrance. Not great odds, but better than walking voluntarily into whatever Processing Station 7 had in store. On 3, Jake breathed, barely audible. She nodded almost imperceptibly, muscles coiling like springs. 1. The guard's finger tightened on his trigger. 2. Emergency klaxons began blaring throughout the facility, drowning out the smaller alarm. Red lights joined the fluorescence, painting everything in strobing chaos. The guards turned their heads toward the sound, confusion evident in their body language. 3. Jake dove left as Maya rolled right, both of them moving toward the platform's edges as gunfire erupted behind them. The service corridor beckoned like a promise of salvation, but salvation had been in short supply lately. As Maya sprinted toward the uncertain darkness ahead, she couldn't shake the feeling that they were running deeper into the trap rather than escaping it. The freight train's wheels shrieked against the ancient rails as Maya pulled the brake lever with everything she had. Sparks showered from beneath the massive cars, illuminating the fog that had rolled in from nowhere. Through the locomotive's grimy windshield, she could see lights ahead. Not the warm glow of a town, but the harsh, clinical white of industrial floodlights. "This isn't on any map," Derek said, pressing his face against the side window. His breath fogged the glass as he strained to make sense of what lay before them. "I memorized every stop on this line before we jumped aboard." The train shuddered to a halt, with a final mechanical gasp. Maya's hands trembled as she released the controls. They'd been running for 3 days straight, ever since Derek had stolen the corporate files that proved Nexus Industries was conducting illegal human experiments. The assassins had been relentless, forcing them onto increasingly desperate escape routes until they'd spotted this rusted freight train sitting idle in an abandoned rail yard. Now, she wondered if they'd simply traded one trap for another. "Look at those buildings," Derek whispered, pointing through the fog. "They're enormous." Maya followed his gaze. Through the shifting mist, she could make out massive concrete structures stretching into the darkness. No windows, no architectural flourishes, just brutal utilitarian blocks that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. The compound sprawled across what must have been hundreds of acres, surrounded by a fence topped with razor wire that gleamed under the floodlights. "We need to get out of here," she said. But even as the words left her mouth, she heard the sound that made her blood freeze. Dogs. Lots of them, and getting closer. Derek was already moving, gathering the stolen files and stuffing them into his jacket. The locomotive's too exposed. We need to get back into one of the freight cars. They scrambled through the narrow passage connecting the engine to the first car, Maya's heart hammering as the barking grew louder. The freight car was filled with shipping containers, their surfaces covered in a fine layer of dust that suggested they'd been sitting here for years. "These containers," Derek said, running his hand along one of them. "They're not commercial shipping. Look at these markings." Maya squinted in the dim light filtering through cracks in the car's walls. Instead of standard shipping codes, the containers bore sequences of letters and numbers that looked more like... Are those Social Security numbers? Before Derek could answer, floodlights blazed through the cracks, turning the freight car into a prison of light and shadow. The dogs were close now, their barking echoing off the concrete walls of the facility. Maya pressed herself against a container, feeling the cold metal through her jacket. Perimeter breach in Section 7, a voice crackled over a radio somewhere outside. Unscheduled arrival on the old rail line. "That's impossible," another voice responded. "Those tracks were supposed to be torn up years ago." "Well, there's a whole damn freight train sitting here, so maybe someone screwed up." Maya exchanged glances with Derek. The casual way the guards talked about the tracks being supposed to be torn up sent chills down her spine. As if this place wasn't meant to exist, wasn't meant to be found. "We need to see what's in these containers," Derek whispered, producing a small crowbar from his backpack. "If those are Social Security numbers..." "Derek, no. We need to focus on getting out of here." But he was already working at the latch on the nearest container. The metal groaned in protest, the sound impossibly loud in the confined space. Maya winced, expecting guards to come flooding in at any moment. The container door swung open with a soft thud. Inside were files, thousands upon thousands of them, stacked in neat rows from floor to ceiling. Derek pulled one at random and opened it under the weak light from his phone. Maya saw a photograph paper-clipped to the inside cover, a middle-aged woman with kind eyes and graying hair. "Rebecca Martinez, Dorby, March 15, 1967, Derek Reed. Status terminated. Memory deletion confirmed. Existence erasure complete." Maya felt the world tilt around her. Existence erasure? Derek was already pulling more files. A young man in military fatigues, an elderly couple standing in front of a house with a white picket fence, a teenage girl in a graduation cap and gown, all with the same stamp, existence erasure complete. "Jesus Christ," Derek breathed. "There must be thousands of people in here, all dead, all erased." The barking was right outside the freight car now. Maya could hear boots on gravel, radio chatter, the mechanical whir of equipment being moved into position. "This is what Nexus was really doing," she whispered, the pieces finally clicking together. The experiments, the data collection. They weren't just killing people, they were making them disappear completely. No records, no traces, no one left to remember they ever existed. The freight car door exploded inward with a deafening crash. The control room's emergency lighting cast everything in hellish red as Maya's fingers flew across the cracked keyboard. Behind her, the facility's alarm system wailed like a dying animal, and she could hear Marcus's ragged breathing as he kept watch at the doorway. "How much longer?" he called over the noise. "I'm trying to decrypt their main database," she replied, sweat beading on her forehead despite the underground chill. "These files... Jesus, Marcus, there are thousands of them." The screen flickered, revealing folder after folder labeled with what appeared to be names and dates. Maya clicked on one at random. Subject 4471, Jennifer Castellanos, processed March 15, 2023. Inside were medical records, psychological evaluations, and something called neural pattern extraction results. "Maya." Marcus's voice carried a warning. She looked up to see him pointing down the corridor. In the distance, flashlight beams were cutting through the darkness, accompanied by the sound of boots on metal flooring. Their pursuers had found another way in. 2 minutes, she whispered, turning back to the computer. Her heart hammered as she navigated deeper into the system. The facility's true purpose was becoming clearer with each file she opened. This wasn't just a research station, it was a processing center. People were brought here, studied, and then disappeared, not killed but erased. The technology seemed to target memory itself, both the subject's memories and somehow any trace of them in the outside world. A folder marked active subjects made her blood freeze. Inside were recent entries, people who had been processed within the last month. At the bottom of the list, her own name stared back at her. Maya Chen, priority target, estimated arrival today. They had been expected. Maya, we need to go. Now. Marcus was backing away from the doorway as the lights grew brighter. She grabbed a USB drive from her pocket and jammed it into the computer, praying the ancient port would work. The transfer began crawling across the screen, 23%. The footsteps were getting closer, and she could make out voices now. Calm, professional, discussing tactical positions like they were exterminators dealing with vermin. 45%. A shadow appeared at the far end of the corridor. There, someone called out. Control room's occupied. Marcus raised the pistol he'd taken from their earlier encounter, but Maya could see his hands shaking. Neither of them were killers, just desperate people who had stumbled into something far beyond their understanding. 67%. The first figure appeared in the doorway, a woman in military fatigues with dead eyes that seemed to look right through them. She raised a weapon that didn't look like any gun Maya had ever seen. It hummed with electric energy. "Please step away from the terminal," the woman said in a voice devoid of emotion. "You're interfering with essential government operations." Government? Marcus kept his gun trained on her, though Maya noticed more figures gathering in the hallway behind the woman. What kind of government erases innocent people? The woman tilted her head slightly, as if the question genuinely puzzled her. Innocent people don't end up here. The facility only processes individuals who pose a threat to national security or public order. Your presence here confirms your guilt. 84%. Maya's palms were slick with sweat as she watched the progress bar. Behind the first woman, she counted at least 4 more figures, all carrying the same strange weapons. "We're not terrorists," Maya said, her voice cracking. "We were running from Meridian Corp assassins. We didn't even know this place existed." "Meridian Corporation is a valued partner in maintaining social stability," the woman replied. "They identify problems. We solve them. 95%. Almost there." "What did we do?" Marcus demanded. "What was our crime?" For the first time, something like expression crossed the woman's face, a cold smile. "You discovered something you weren't supposed to. You began asking questions that threatened the established order. In the old days, that might have earned you a prison sentence or an accident. But we've evolved beyond such crude methods. 98%. Now we can simply make it so you never existed at all. Your friends will forget you. Your family will have no memory of you. Records will vanish, photographs will fade, and the world will continue as if Maya Chen and Marcus Rodriguez were never born. 99. The beauty of it, the woman continued, is that you won't suffer. You'll simply stop, and no one will mourn you because no one will remember there was ever anyone to mourn. 100%. Maya yanked the USB drive from the computer just as the woman raised her weapon. The air filled with a sound like tearing silk, and something that felt like ice-cold lightning crackled past Maya's ear. Marcus grabbed her hand and they ran, diving through a maintenance hatch as more energy bolts seared the air where they had been standing. In the darkness of the ventilation shaft, crawling toward an uncertain escape, Maya clutched the drive containing the evidence of this place's horrors. They might not survive the night, but at least now they knew what they were truly running from. The locomotive's headlight carved through the darkness ahead, revealing twisted metal and overgrown vegetation that seemed to reach toward them like grasping fingers. Maya kept one hand on the throttle while scanning the abandoned control panel, trying to make sense of the faded labels and corroded switches. "How much fuel do we have left?" Chen asked from behind her, his voice tight with exhaustion. Maya glanced at the gauge, its needle hovering dangerously close to empty. "Maybe 20 miles if we're lucky." The train shuddered as they hit another section of damaged track, the violent motion throwing Chen against the wall. He winced, pressing his hand to his wounded shoulder where the corporate assassin's bullet had grazed him during their escape from the warehouse. There, Maya pointed ahead where the tracks curved around a massive concrete embankment. "Something's different about the rails up there." As they rounded the bend, the rusted, weed-choked tracks they'd been following suddenly transformed into pristine steel rails that gleamed under their headlight. The change was so abrupt, it looked like someone had drawn a line in the earth. On one side, decades of abandonment; on the other, obvious maintenance and care. "That's impossible," Chen breathed. "Who's been maintaining tracks out here?" The answer came into view as they crested a small hill. Below them, nestled in a valley that shouldn't have existed on any map, sprawled a complex of low, windowless buildings surrounded by a double perimeter of electrified fencing. Floodlights swept the grounds in methodical patterns, and guard towers punctuated the fence line at regular intervals. Maya's blood turned to ice. "This isn't right. We studied the satellite images of this route for weeks. There was nothing here but forest." The facility looked like it had been carved directly from the bedrock, its angular structures blending seamlessly with the natural landscape. No roads led to it that Maya could see, no obvious way in or out except for the train tracks that terminated at a massive loading dock. "Cut the engine," Chen whispered, though they were still half a mile away. Maya's hand hovered over the controls. "If we stop here, we'll have to walk out, in the dark, through whatever this place is. And if we don't stop, we roll right into what looks like a government black site." The decision was made for them when bright spotlights suddenly blazed to life along the tracks ahead, illuminating their freight train in harsh white light. An electronic voice boomed from speakers hidden in the darkness. "Transport 77 Alpha, you are 3 minutes ahead of schedule. Proceed to loading Bay 5 for immediate processing." Maya and Chen stared at each other in horror. "They were expecting us," Chen said. Maya's mind raced. The corporate assassins who'd been hunting them, the mysterious contact who'd given them this escape route, the perfectly maintained tracks leading to nowhere. None of it had been coincidence. "We've been herded," she realized, "like cattle." The spotlights tracked their movement as the train continued its inexorable roll toward the facility. Maya could see figures moving in the guard towers now, and what looked like loading crews assembling on the platform ahead. "Jump," Chen said suddenly. "We jump now, while we still can." Maya looked at the speedometer. They were still doing 30 miles per hour on the downgrade. "We'll break our necks. Better than whatever's waiting for us down there." Through the windshield, Maya could see the loading platform growing larger. Workers in hazmat suits were wheeling out gurneys and what looked like body bags. Her stomach lurched as she realized what kind of cargo this train was meant to be carrying. "Oh God, Chen, look at what they're unloading from the other trains." In the harsh floodlights, she could see 3 other freight trains at different loading bays. Workers were efficiently transferring human-shaped bundles from the cars to waiting vehicles that looked more like mobile crematoriums than transport trucks. The electronic voice crackled to life again. "Be advised, Transport 77 Alpha contains 2 priority targets for immediate processing. Implement Erasure Protocol Omega upon arrival." Chen was already moving toward the rear of the locomotive. "Now, Maya, we go now." But as Maya turned to follow him, she spotted something that made her freeze. In the cab of the train at loading Bay 3, illuminated by the work lights, was a face she recognized from the corporate databases she'd hacked months ago. Dr. Elizabeth Voss, the geneticist who'd supposedly died in a car accident 6 months earlier. Dr. Voss was very much alive, and she was staring directly at Maya through the glass, her mouth moving in what looked like a desperate warning. The train was less than 200 yards from the platform now, and Maya could hear the automatic braking system beginning to engage. Whatever this place was, whatever happened to the people who arrived here, they had less than a minute to avoid finding out firsthand. Chen grabbed her arm. "Maya, now or never." The train's brakes screamed against rusted rails as Maya forced the ancient locomotive to a grinding halt. Through the cracked windshield, she could see the tracks simply ended, not broken or damaged, but deliberately terminated at a concrete barrier that rose from the earth like a monolithic gravestone. "This can't be right," she muttered, checking the faded route map they'd found in the conductor's compartment. According to the yellowed paper, the line should have continued for another 30 miles before reaching the old mining settlement of Copper Falls. Behind her, Kane stirred from his uneasy sleep, wincing as he shifted his bandaged shoulder. "Why did we stop?" "End of the line." Literally. Maya pointed ahead to where the barrier stood, its surface stained with decades of rust and weather. Beyond it, she could make out the skeletal remains of what might have once been buildings, their metal frameworks jutting from overgrown vegetation like the ribs of some massive beast. Kane struggled to his feet, joining her at the controls. "That's not Copper Falls." "No kidding." Maya studied the terrain beyond the barrier. Something felt wrong about the way the vegetation grew. Too uniform, too controlled. The trees formed perfect lines, as if they'd been planted to obscure whatever lay behind them. "Help me with this door. We need to take a closer look." The locomotive's side door had rusted shut, requiring both of them to force it open with a tortured shriek of metal. The air outside carried an odd chemical tang, like ozone after a thunderstorm mixed with something medicinal. Maya wrinkled her nose as they climbed down onto the gravel bed. Up close, the concrete barrier revealed more details. A faded government seal was barely visible near the top, along with warnings in multiple languages about authorized personnel and restricted access. But what caught Maya's attention were the newer additions. Surveillance cameras mounted on telescoping poles, their red recording lights blinking steadily. "We're being watched," she whispered. Kane followed her gaze upward. "Those cameras are military grade. Motion sensors too, probably." He pointed to barely visible sensor arrays hidden among the artificial foliage. "This isn't some abandoned facility." A low hum began to emanate from somewhere beyond the trees, growing steadily louder. Maya felt the vibration through her boots, a rhythmic pulse that seemed to match her accelerating heartbeat. The sound triggered something primal in her nervous system, a warning that they were no longer predators but prey. "We need to go, now." She grabbed Kane's good arm, pulling him back toward the train. But as they reached the locomotive, Maya realized their escape route had been severed. The freight cars they'd been pulling had somehow become disconnected, leaving only the engine itself. Worse, she could hear the distant whine of approaching vehicles, multiple engines growing louder by the second. "The woods," Kane said, pointing to the natural forest that bordered the artificial plantation. "If we can reach the tree line." His words were cut off by a voice amplified through hidden speakers, echoing from all directions with an unnaturally calm tone. "Maya Chen and Kane Morrison, please remain stationary. Compliance will result in expedited processing." Maya felt ice flood her veins. They knew their names, not just their faces from corporate databases, but their actual identities. "How is that possible?" she breathed. Kane's expression had gone grim. "Nexus Corporation. They must have shared our biometric data with whoever runs this place." He was already moving, despite his injury, heading for the forest. "Standard protocol for high-value fugitives." They ran, abandoning stealth for speed as the sound of vehicles grew deafening. Behind them, bright lights suddenly blazed to life, turning the barrier area into an artificial daylight that stretched long shadows ahead of their fleeing forms. Maya could hear the mechanical whir of camera systems tracking their movement. The forest offered temporary refuge, but Maya knew it was illusory. Their pursuers would have thermal imaging, probably drones already being deployed to sweep the area. They needed shelter, concealment, and most importantly, answers about what kind of facility could make corporate assassins look like amateur hour. There, Kane gasped, pointing through the trees to where a concrete structure was barely visible through the undergrowth. Some kind of maintenance building. As they approached, Maya could see it was more than that. The building's design was distinctly government issue, circa 1960s, with the kind of utilitarian architecture that screamed classified research. A corroded sign near what had once been the entrance was still partially readable. Cognitive Research Division, authorized personnel only. Kane tried the door, unlocked, which somehow made Maya more nervous than if it had been secured. Inside, emergency lighting cast everything in hellish red. Banks of computers lined the walls, their screens dark but still humming with power. Filing cabinets stretched into the shadows, and the air carried that same chemical tang, stronger now. Maya approached the nearest computer terminal, its screen flickering to life at her touch. What she saw made her blood freeze. Hundreds of files, each containing detailed psychological profiles, medical histories, and termination dates, all marked with the same stamp, existence nullified. The freight car's metal floor vibrated beneath Maya's boots as she crouched beside the control panel they'd jury-rigged to the train's ancient systems. The green glow of salvaged electronics cast eerie shadows across her face while she worked, fingers dancing over exposed circuitry with practiced precision. Outside, the landscape had shifted from industrial wasteland to something far more unsettling, endless rows of concrete barriers topped with razor wire, stretching into the darkness like metallic teeth. "How much farther?" Kai whispered from his position at the door, peering through a gap in the rusted metal. His breath formed small clouds in the frigid air that had begun seeping through every crack and crevice of their makeshift shelter. Maya glanced at the modified GPS unit she'd cobbled together from their stolen corporate equipment. The signal was weak, fragmented, but the coordinates were clear enough. 2 miles, maybe 3, but something's wrong with these readings. She tapped the screen, frowning. "According to this, we're heading toward a location that doesn't officially exist." The train's rhythm had changed over the past hour, the steady clacking of wheels against rails becoming more irregular, as if the tracks themselves were in poor repair. Through the gaps in the freight car's walls, they caught glimpses of structures that defied easy categorization, massive concrete towers rising from the earth like monuments to some forgotten purpose, their surfaces unmarked by windows or doors. "Maya?" Kai's voice carried a new tension. "You need to see this." She abandoned the control panel and joined him at the observation point. In the distance, a sprawling complex emerged from the darkness, its perimeter lit by harsh sodium lights that turned the surrounding landscape sickly yellow. The facilities stretched for miles in every direction, a geometric cancer carved into the earth. What disturbed Maya most wasn't its size, but its architecture. Every building was identical, as if constructed from the same blueprint, repeated endlessly in perfect rows. "Government black site," she breathed. "Has to be. But why would our stolen train be programmed to go here?" Before Kai could respond, their car lurched violently to one side. The sound of grinding metal filled the air as automated switching systems engaged, guiding their train onto tracks that curved directly toward the facility's main entrance. Maya scrambled back to her jury-rigged controls, but the green lights had shifted to red. "I've lost control," she said, her fingers flying over the interface. "Something else is steering us now." Through the freight car's walls, they heard new sounds, the hum of powerful machinery, the mechanical whir of sensors tracking their approach. The train began to slow, but not from any command Maya had given. External systems had taken over, drawing them inexorably toward a massive gate that was already grinding open to receive them. "We have to jump," Kai said, moving toward their gear. "At this speed? On those tracks?" Maya shook her head. "Look around us. Those barriers aren't just for show. We're in a kill zone now. Motion sensors, automated defenses, we'd be cut down before we hit the ground." The train continued its measured deceleration as they passed through the facility's outer perimeter. Maya caught glimpses of guard towers, but strangely, they appeared unmanned. Everything about this place suggested automation, as if human oversight had been deemed unnecessary or undesirable. Their car entered a vast receiving bay carved directly into the earth, descending on tracks that spiraled downward into the facility's depths. Emergency lighting flickered to life along the walls, illuminating symbols and warning signs in languages Maya didn't recognize. Some appeared to be standard hazmat warnings, but others defied classification entirely. Recording everything, she whispered, activating the documentation protocols on her modified tablet. Whatever they were walking into, someone needed to witness it. Maya and Kai exchanged glances as they heard new sounds from outside, footsteps but wrong somehow, too regular and synchronized to be entirely human. Through the freight car's gaps, they saw figures moving across the platform, dressed in identical grey uniforms that seemed to absorb the emergency lighting rather than reflect it. "Stay quiet," Maya mouthed, powering down her electronics to avoid detection. But as the footsteps approached their car, she realized silence wouldn't save them. These figures moved with purpose, as if they already knew exactly where to find their uninvited passengers. The sound of cutting tools sparked to life outside, and brilliant orange light began tracing along the freight car's sealed doors. Whatever this facility was, whatever purpose it served, Maya and Kai had just become its newest subjects. The corporate assassins who'd been hunting them seemed like a distant concern now, replaced by something far more systematic and thorough. The cutting tools finished their work, and the freight car's doors fell away with a thunderous crash. The control room's emergency lighting cast everything in hellish red as Marcus frantically worked the console, his fingers dancing across buttons and switches with desperate precision. Behind him, Elena kept watch through the reinforced glass, her stolen security badge still clipped to her torn jacket. "How much longer?" she whispered, though her voice seemed to echo in the cramped space. "Almost there," Marcus muttered, sweat beading on his forehead despite the facility's bone-deep chill. The database was vast, decades of records, thousands of names, all catalogued with clinical precision. Each entry represented someone who had been systematically erased from existence, their lives wiped clean as if they had never drawn breath. The screen flickered, displaying file after file of the disappeared. Elena's breath caught as she recognized faces from missing person reports she'd investigated years ago, cases that had gone cold, witnesses who had simply vanished, whistleblowers who had been silenced in the most permanent way possible. "There," Marcus said, his voice tight with emotion. "Rebecca Chen, age 12, disappeared from San Francisco 3 years ago." The photograph showed a young girl with Marcus's eyes and a bright smile that would never age another day. Elena placed a gentle hand on his shoulder, feeling the tremor that ran through him. "Marcus." Status terminated. Neural pattern archived. Physical remains disposed of via Standard Protocol 7. He read the words like a man pronouncing his own death sentence. "She's gone, Elena. They killed her and kept her memories like trophies." The sound of approaching footsteps echoed from the corridor outside. Elena pressed herself against the door, peering through the small window. 3 guards in black tactical gear moved with purpose down the hallway, their movements coordinated and silent. "We need to go," she urged, but Marcus remained transfixed by the screen. "Wait," he said, his fingers flying across the keyboard. "There's something else. A current project. Operation Tabula Rasa. They're not just erasing individuals anymore, Elena. They're preparing to wipe entire populations." The file that opened made Elena's blood run cold. Satellite imagery showed major metropolitan areas marked with red zones. Casualty projections ran into the millions. The technology that had been used to erase single targets had been scaled up, weaponized into something that could delete the memories and identities of everyone within a 50-mile radius. "They're planning to test it," Marcus whispered. 3 days from now, Denver, Colorado, 2 million people will wake up with no idea who they are, no memories, no connections, perfect blank slates for reconditioning. The footsteps were closer now, accompanied by the low crackle of radio chatter. Elena could make out fragments of conversation: control room compromised, lockdown protocols, eliminate on site. "Download it," she said urgently. "Everything. We need proof." Marcus was already ahead of her, a portable drive plugged into the system as files transferred in a blue cascade of data. The progress bar crawled forward with agonizing slowness: 60%, 70, 80. A keycard beeped outside the door. Elena's heart hammered against her ribs as she pressed herself against the wall beside the entrance. The first guard stepped through, his weapon raised, scanning the room with professional efficiency. Elena struck fast and silent, her elbow connecting with the base of his skull. He dropped without a sound, but his fall alerted the others. "Contact!" The second guard's shout was cut short as Marcus launched himself from behind the console, tackling the man to the ground. They grappled for the weapon, rolling across the floor in a desperate struggle. The third guard took aim at Marcus, but Elena was already moving. She grabbed the fallen guard's sidearm and fired twice. The bullets sparked off the metal walls as the guard dove for cover behind a bank of servers. 95%, Marcus called out, still wrestling with his opponent. Elena laid down covering fire, forcing the remaining guard to stay hidden while precious seconds ticked by. The facility's alarm system finally activated, filling the air with a piercing wail that seemed to penetrate her bones. "Got it!" Marcus yanked the drive free just as his opponent broke loose and reached for a backup weapon. Elena put 2 rounds center mass and the guard collapsed. The room fell silent except for their ragged breathing and the endless shriek of the alarm. "The train," she said. "We need to get back to the train." They ran through corridors that had become a maze of flashing lights and shadows. Security teams poured in from multiple directions, their shouts and radio chatter creating a cacophony of pursuit. Elena led the way, her police training guiding them through the facility's layout, always seeking the path of least resistance. Behind them, she could hear the thunderous footfalls of their pursuers, the bark of orders, the metallic click of weapons being readied. The exit was close now. She could see the heavy steel door that led to the outside platform where their stolen freight train waited in the mountain darkness. But between them and freedom, a dozen tactical lights suddenly blazed to life, and Elena realized they had run straight into a trap. Security doors slammed shut behind them, with a resonance that seemed to echo through Maya's bones. Emergency lighting bathed the corridor in pulsing red, transforming their shadows into writhing phantoms on the walls. Jake's breathing came in sharp bursts beside her as they pressed forward into the bowels of the facility. "The server room should be 3 levels down," Maya whispered, consulting the schematic she'd memorized from Dr. Chen's files. "But we need to move fast. Those blast doors won't hold them forever." They found a service elevator, its yellowed buttons flickering weakly. As they descended, Maya caught glimpses of each floor through the small window, laboratories filled with strange equipment, holding cells with reinforced glass, and rooms that seemed to bend light in impossible ways. The deeper they went, the more the air itself felt different, charged with an energy that made her skin crawl. The elevator shuddered to a stop. Level B-3. The doors opened to reveal a corridor lined with massive servers, their cooling fans creating a low, ominous hum. Data cables snaked across the ceiling like technological vines, pulsing with transmitted information. "Jesus," Jake muttered, staring at the wall-mounted displays showing thousands of files being processed simultaneously. "How many people are they tracking?" Maya moved to the nearest terminal, her fingers flying across the keyboard. Everyone who's ever been flagged as a threat to national security, journalists, whistleblowers, activists, anyone who asks too many questions. Her voice caught as familiar names scrolled past. Colleagues, friends, people she'd thought had simply disappeared into new lives. The system demanded administrator credentials. Maya inserted the stolen keycard, praying Chen's access level would be sufficient. A new interface opened, revealing the true scope of Project Nullpoint. Tens of thousands of records, each representing a person systematically erased from digital existence. There, she said, pulling up her own file. The data was staggering. Every email deleted, every photo scrubbed, every mention of her name systematically purged from news articles and academic papers. But more disturbing were the psychological profiles attached to each target, predicting their behavior with frightening accuracy. They knew we'd come here, Maya realized, her blood turning cold. Look at this. Behavioral analysis suggests 73% probability of attempting data recovery from primary servers. Jake leaned over her shoulder, his face grim. If they knew, why let us get this far? Before Maya could answer, the lights cut out. Emergency power kicked in a moment later, but the damage was done. The security protocols had activated. Steel barriers began descending from the ceiling, sectioning off the server room into isolated chambers. "They're containing us," Jake said, drawing his weapon as footsteps echoed from the stairwell. "How much time do you need?" Maya's fingers danced across multiple keyboards simultaneously, initiating data dumps to external drives while uploading corruption protocols to the main servers. 2 minutes to download the critical files, 5 to cripple their system completely. We might not have 5 minutes. The first of Weber's security team appeared at the far end of the corridor, their tactical lights cutting through the red-tinged darkness. Jake fired twice, forcing them back into cover. The sound was deafening in the enclosed space. "Maya, whatever you're going to do—" "I'm trying!" She watched progress bars crawl across multiple screens, each percentage point feeling like an eternity. The corruption virus was working, but slowly, too slowly. More gunfire erupted as the security team advanced, using the server towers for cover. Jake retreated toward Maya's position, reloading on the move. A bullet sparked off the terminal beside her head, sending fragments of plastic and metal across her hands. 60% complete, she called out, tasting blood where she'd bitten her tongue. The virus is spreading through their backup systems too. A new sound joined the chaos. Heavy mechanical clanking from above. Through the red emergency lighting, Maya glimpsed something that made her heart stop. The ceiling panels were opening, revealing not just surveillance cameras, but weapon systems. Automated turrets descended on articulated arms, their targeting lasers painting deadly dots across the server room. "Run!" Jake shoved her away from the terminal just as the first turret opened fire, chewing apart the workstation where she'd been standing. The external drives scattered across the floor, some sparking from bullet damage. They sprinted between the server towers as the automated weapons tracked their movement. The machines were methodical, precise, designed to neutralize threats without damaging the critical infrastructure. Maya dove behind a cooling unit as bullets sparked off its metal housing. "The drives!" she shouted over the gunfire. "I need to get the drives!" 3 of the 5 external devices lay in the open, their data lights still blinking. Everything they'd fought for, everything that could expose Project Null Point to the world, was scattered across 30 feet of killing ground. Jake met her eyes across the gap between their positions. In that look, she saw him calculating odds, measuring distances, accepting what needed to be done. Before she could stop him, he broke cover, diving toward the scattered drives as the turrets swiveled to track him. The maintenance tunnel stretched ahead like a throat waiting to swallow them whole. Maya pressed herself against the concrete wall, listening to the rhythmic drip of condensation echo through the darkness. Behind her, the distant hum of the facility's machinery created a constant reminder of where they were, inside the belly of a machine designed to unmake people. "The electrical conduits run parallel to the main corridor," Chen whispered, his fingers tracing the blueprint he'd memorized from the stolen files. "If we follow them, we should reach the central processing unit without triggering the motion sensors in the primary passages." Maya nodded, though doubt gnawed at her. Every step deeper into this place felt like walking toward their own erasure. She'd seen what happened to the others, the way their faces had simply vanished from the photographs, their names scrubbed from every record as if they'd never existed at all. They moved in single file, Chen's penlight casting a thin beam that barely penetrated the oppressive darkness. The walls here were older than the rest of the facility, rough-hewn stone that predated the sleek laboratories above. Maya ran her fingers along the surface and felt carved marks. Tallies, she realized. Someone had been counting days down here. Chen. She grabbed his arm, pointing to the markings. Look at this. He examined the scratches with growing alarm. There had to be hundreds of them, maybe thousands. How long has this place been operating? Before Maya could answer, a new sound reached them. Footsteps, echoing from somewhere ahead. They froze, listening as the rhythmic clicking of heels on concrete grew louder. Chen killed the light, plunging them into absolute darkness. The subjects from Car 7 have been processed. A woman's voice carried through the tunnel. Dr. Valdez wants the neural patterns uploaded to the archive before midnight. What about the two that got away? A man's voice, closer now. Security's been searching the outer perimeter for hours. They won't get far. The perimeter fence is electrified, and the nearest town is 40 miles through desert. Even if they survive the night, they'll be back. They always come back. Maya felt Chen's hand find hers in the darkness. The voices were moving away now, but their words lingered like poison in the air. Car 7, that had to be the freight car they'd escaped from. The other passengers they'd left behind were already gone, processed, erased. When the footsteps faded completely, Chen risked switching the light back on. His face was pale, drawn tight with guilt. We should have tried to help them. We couldn't save everyone, Maya said, though the words felt hollow. If we'd stayed, we'd be processed too. They pressed on through the tunnel, following the electrical conduits deeper into the facility's core. The air grew warmer as they descended, thick with the smell of ozone and something else, something organic and wrong. Maya tried not to think about what that might be. The tunnel branched ahead, splitting into 3 passages. Chen consulted his mental map, frowning. This isn't on the blueprints. The facility must be larger than we thought. A low vibration began to pulse through the walls, accompanied by a sound like distant screaming. Maya's blood went cold as she realized what they were hearing. The erasure process in action. Somewhere above them, another person was being systematically deleted from existence. Left passage, Chen decided, though his voice betrayed his uncertainty. It should connect to the server room. They hurried through the narrowing corridor, the vibrations growing stronger with each step. The walls here were lined with cables and pipes, all leading toward the facility's heart. Maya noticed small alcoves built into the stone, each one numbered. She peered into one and immediately wished she hadn't. Bones. Human bones, sorted and catalogued with clinical precision. They keep trophies, she breathed, backing away from the alcove. Chen looked where she pointed and swore softly. Not trophies, evidence, proof that the erased people once existed. The realization hit Maya like a physical blow. The facility wasn't just deleting people from records and memories. It was preserving the only evidence of their existence in this underground ossuary, a twisted form of accountability that no one would ever see. They reached the end of the tunnel, where a heavy steel door blocked their path. Chen examined the electronic lock, his tools already in hand. "Give me 2 minutes." Maya kept watch while he worked, her mind racing. Even if they found the servers, even if they could somehow expose this place, would anyone believe them? Would anyone remember long enough to act? The lock clicked open with a soft beep. Beyond the door lay a chamber filled with servers, their blue lights casting eerie shadows on the walls. Banks of hard drives hummed quietly, storing the neural patterns and memories of thousands of erased souls. "This is it," Chen whispered. "The archive. Everything they've stolen is here." Maya stared at the rows of servers, each one representing countless lives reduced to data. They'd found the heart of the machine. Now they had to figure out how to stop it. The emergency lighting cast everything in sickly amber as Maya and Chen descended deeper into the facility's bowels. The elevator had been their only option, after the security doors sealed behind them, trapping them in a maze of sterile corridors that seemed to stretch infinitely downward. "Level sub-7, Chen read from the indicator panel, his voice barely audible over the mechanical hum. How deep does this place go? Maya gripped the stolen keycard tighter, watching the numbers climb. The elevator suddenly lurched to a stop at sub-12, doors sliding open with a pneumatic hiss. They stepped into darkness broken only by strips of fluorescent lighting that flickered to life as motion sensors detected their presence. This level felt different, older. The walls were concrete instead of the polished steel they'd encountered above, and the air carried a musty scent that spoke of decades of secrets. Hand-painted signs pointed toward different wings: psychological evaluation, memory extraction, permanent storage. Jesus, Maya whispered, following the arrow toward permanent storage. They're not just erasing records, they're erasing people. The corridor opened into a vast chamber lined with what looked like hospital beds, each one surrounded by banks of machinery that hummed with quiet efficiency. But as they moved closer, Maya realized these weren't beds at all. They were suspension pods, each one containing a human form floating in pale blue liquid. Chen stopped at the nearest pod, pressing his palm against the glass. Inside, a middle-aged woman floated peacefully, her eyes closed, breathing apparatus covering her nose and mouth. A placard at the base read, "Subject 2847, Dr. Elizabeth Reeves, geneticist, terminated 2019. Terminated, Maya said, reading over his shoulder. But she's alive. Not really. The voice came from behind them, calm and clinical. They spun to find Dr. Harrison approaching, flanked by two guards in tactical gear. He looked older than in the photograph they'd found, his hair completely grey now, but his eyes held the same cold intelligence. Dr. Reeves ceased to exist the moment she discovered our work with genetic memory manipulation. Now she's simply archived. Maya's hand moved instinctively toward the pistol she'd taken from the guard upstairs, but Chen caught her wrist. The guards already had their weapons trained on them. Fascinating technology, isn't it? Harrison continued, gesturing to the pods. We don't simply kill inconvenient people anymore. We preserve them while erasing every trace of their existence from the outside world. Their families forget them. Their colleagues move on. Even government databases purge their records. It's far more elegant than murder. You sick bastard, Maya snarled. How many people are down here? Currently, 843. Harrison's tone suggested he was discussing inventory rather than human lives. Politicians who asked too many questions, scientists who made uncomfortable discoveries, journalists who got too close to the truth, even a few corporate executives who developed inconvenient consciences. Chen stepped closer to another pod, this one containing a younger man in a military uniform. How do you do it? Make people forget? Targeted electromagnetic manipulation combined with carefully designed disinformation campaigns. The human brain is remarkably susceptible to suggestion when approached correctly. We simply edit reality. Harrison smiled, the expression never reaching his eyes. Your own existence, for instance, has already been partially compromised. Mr. Chen's employment records at Neurodyne have been altered. Your apartment lease, Miss Torres, has mysteriously vanished from municipal databases. Maya felt ice forming in her stomach. That's impossible, is it? How many people actually knew you existed before last week? Really knew you? Your landlord remembers renting to someone else now. Your few friends have been experiencing curious gaps in their memories. It's already begun. The guards stepped closer, weapons raised. Harrison pulled out a tablet, tapping through screens with casual efficiency. The beautiful irony is that no one will miss you because, according to reality, you were never here. Your train hijacking? Security footage shows an empty locomotive rolling along abandoned tracks. The guards you incapacitated? They remember equipment malfunctions, not intruders. Chen grabbed Maya's hand, squeezing tight. Around them the pods hummed with their awful cargo of the erased. 843 people who had been deemed inconvenient truths, now floating in artificial dreams while the world forgot they had ever existed. The process is quite peaceful, Harrison said, almost kindly. You'll experience a gradual disconnection from consciousness. Meanwhile, the last traces of your existence will be systematically removed from every database, every memory, every record. Within 6 months, it will be as if Maya Torres and David Chen never existed at all. Maya looked at the pods surrounding them, at the countless faces floating in their chemical sleep. Each one had been someone's child, someone's friend, someone's love. Now they were nothing but archived inconveniences in a madman's vision of controlled reality. But as Harrison signaled the guards forward, Maya noticed something he hadn't: the emergency fire suppression system running along the ceiling and the electrical junction box just within reach. Sometimes the most elegant solutions were also the most destructive. The fluorescent lights flickered overhead as Maya pressed herself against the cold concrete wall, her breath coming in sharp bursts. The facility's corridors stretched endlessly in both directions, a maze of sterile white that seemed designed to disorient. Behind her, she could hear the steady rhythm of boots on linoleum. Their pursuers were close. "This way," Jake whispered, grabbing her arm and pulling her toward a service door marked with faded warning symbols. The handle turned with surprising ease, revealing a narrow stairwell that descended into darkness. They'd been running for what felt like hours since escaping the containment level. The facility was vast, far larger than either of them had imagined when they'd first glimpsed it from the train. Underground levels stretched down like the rings of hell, each one housing different aspects of the erasure program they'd stumbled upon. Maya's mind raced as they descended the metal stairs, their footsteps echoing despite their attempts at stealth. The files they'd seen in Dr. Hendrick's laboratory painted a picture so horrifying she could barely process it. Thousands of people, systematically removed not just from life, but from memory itself. Families who forgot they'd ever had children. Friends who couldn't recall faces they'd loved for decades. "We can't keep running," she gasped as they reached another landing. "We need to find a way out, or find someone who can help us expose this." Jake paused, pressing his ear to the door leading off the stairwell. "After what we saw up there, I'm not sure there's anyone left to help. This operation has been running for 40 years, Maya. How many people do you think know about it? How many are complicit?" The question hung in the air like a toxic cloud. Maya had been trying not to think about the implications, but they were unavoidable. The technology required for memory manipulation on this scale, the infrastructure, the funding, it had to involve multiple government agencies, possibly reaching all the way to the top. A distant alarm began to wail, its electronic shriek bouncing off the stairwell walls. Red emergency lights bathed everything in an ominous glow, and Maya heard the unmistakable sound of heavy doors slamming shut somewhere above them. "Lockdown protocol," Jake said grimly. "They're sealing the facility." Maya felt a chill run down her spine. "What does that mean for us?" "It means they're not planning to let anyone leave. Not us, not their own staff. This whole place is about to become a tomb." They resumed their descent, moving faster now despite the increased risk of detection. The stairwell seemed to go down forever, each landing marking another level of the underground complex. Maya began to wonder if they were descending into some kind of bunker system built deep enough to survive nuclear war. At the 7th sublevel, Jake stopped abruptly. Through the door's small window, they could see a corridor lined with what appeared to be storage units. But these weren't typical storage facilities. Each unit was the size of a small room, with heavy, reinforced doors and electronic locks. "Archive level," Maya read from a sign mounted on the wall. "Personal effects and documentation." Jake's face went pale. "They keep trophies." "Jesus, Maya, they keep trophies of the people they've erased." The implications hit her like a physical blow. Somewhere behind those locked doors were the remnants of thousands of lives. Photographs, personal belongings, documents that proved these people had existed before the government decided they shouldn't. "We need to document this," she said, pulling out the small camera they'd found in the laboratory. "Whatever happens to us, someone needs to know." As she began photographing the storage level through the window, Jake explored the rest of the stairwell. His voice drifted up from below, tight with urgency. "Maya, get down here, now." She found him standing before a massive blast door, its surface scarred with age and marked with radiation symbols. A small placard beside it read, "Deep storage. Authorization level Omega required." "This is it," Jake said quietly. "This is where they keep the worst of it." Before Maya could respond, the sound of footsteps echoed from somewhere above them. Their pursuers had found the stairwell. Jake punched a series of numbers into the blast door's keypad, the access code they'd memorized from Dr. Hendrix's computer. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, with a grinding mechanical sound that seemed to come from the earth itself, the massive door began to slide open. Beyond it lay darkness so complete it seemed solid. The air that rushed out carried scents of old metal and something else, something organic and wrong. "Whatever's down there," Maya whispered. They really didn't want anyone to find it. The footsteps above were getting closer. They could hear voices now, coordinating search patterns. In moments, their pursuers would reach this level. Jake stepped toward the open blast door. "Sometimes the only way out is through." Maya followed him into the darkness, and behind them, the blast door began its slow, inexorable slide closed. The train's emergency brakes screamed against rusted rails as Maya threw herself against the controls, sparks showering the cabin in orange light. Through the cracked windshield, she could see the facility's main gate rushing toward them, a steel barrier that would crumple their locomotive like paper. "Hold on!" she shouted to Marcus, who was pressed against the communications console, desperately trying to boost the signal on Dr. Chen's transmission device. The train shuddered violently as it carved through the outer fence, concrete posts exploding into fragments. Maya felt her ribs slam against the control panel, but she kept her grip on the brake lever. They needed to stop before hitting the main building, but not before getting close enough to ensure Chen's data reached the outside world. Marcus's fingers flew across the device's interface. The signal's still too weak. These walls are lined with some kind of interference material. Through the chaos of their approach, Maya spotted movement in her peripheral vision. Black SUVs were converging from multiple directions, their occupants already firing at the train's armored sides. But it was the figures emerging from the facility itself that made her blood freeze. People in white lab coats were streaming from the building, but they moved wrong, their gaits mechanical and synchronized. Even from this distance she could see their faces, blank, expressionless, like living dolls. "Marcus, look at them," she gasped. He glanced up from the device and his face went pale. "Jesus Christ. Are those the people they've been erasing?" The train was slowing now, but momentum still carried them forward. Maya could make out more details of the facility's courtyard. Rows of identical figures stood in perfect formation, all facing the incoming locomotive. Men and women of various ages, but all sharing that same vacant stare. A new barrage of gunfire erupted from the SUVs, this time targeting the engine compartment. Steam began hissing from ruptured pipes, and the lights in the cabin flickered. "Whatever you're going to do with that thing, do it now," Maya yelled. Marcus slammed his palm against the device's activation panel. "I need to get higher, closer to the building. The signal's still not penetrating their dampening field." Maya looked ahead at the rapidly approaching main structure. A brutalist concrete monolith with narrow windows that reflected nothing. They had perhaps 30 seconds before impact. "The roof access," she said, pointing to a ladder bolted to the cabin's rear wall. "Can you make the transmission mobile?" "Maybe. The battery pack is designed for portability, but I'd need to maintain line of sight with their main communication array." He gestured toward a cluster of satellite dishes visible on the facility's roof. Another volley of bullets shattered what remained of the side windows. Maya could hear engines roaring closer. The SUVs were trying to flank them, cut off any escape routes, not that escape was still an option. She made the decision that had been building in her chest since they'd first discovered Dr. Chen's files. "Go, get to the roof and send that data. I'll keep this thing moving as long as possible." Marcus hesitated. "Maya, if you stay down here, someone needs to witness this." She nodded toward the approaching army of blank-faced figures. Chen was right. People need to know what they've been doing here. He grabbed the transmission device and slung its battery pack over his shoulder. 30 seconds after I get the signal out, we run. Together. Promise me. Promise. Marcus disappeared up the ladder as Maya fought to keep the dying locomotive on course. Through the front windshield, she could now see individual faces among the erased people. A middle-aged woman in a floral dress that had probably been colorful once. A young man whose employee badge still hung around his neck. An elderly person whose white hair was perfectly combed despite the chaos. They all watched the approaching train with the same empty expression. The main building loomed ahead, its walls now close enough to read the small government placards mounted beside the entrance. Department of Cognitive Security. Established 1978. The bureaucratic language seemed obscene given what was happening in the courtyard below. Above her, she could hear Marcus shouting something, but his words were lost in the screech of metal and the roar of pursuing engines. The facility's loudspeakers crackled to life, broadcasting a calm female voice that seemed to come from everywhere at once. Unauthorized personnel are advised to cease hostile actions and submit to processing. Resistance will result in immediate neural restructuring. Maya laughed bitterly. Neural restructuring. As if they were fixing a software glitch instead of stealing people's souls. The train's speed had dropped significantly, but they were still moving, maybe 200 yards from the main building now. The blank-faced crowd began to part, creating a clear path directly to the facility's entrance, as if they wanted the locomotive to crash into the building. That realization sent ice through Maya's veins. They weren't trying to stop the train, they were guiding it somewhere specific. The emergency lighting cast everything in hellish red as Maya and Chen raced through the collapsing corridors of the nullification facility. Behind them, the quantum containment breach spread like digital cancer, unmaking reality one pixel at a time. Walls flickered between existing and not existing, creating a nauseating strobe effect that made Maya's eyes water. The main server room should be just ahead, Chen shouted over the screaming alarms. His stolen security badge bounced against his chest as they ran. If we can upload the virus directly to their core systems. A section of ceiling simply vanished above them, revealing twisted metal beams that shouldn't have been able to support anything. Maya grabbed Chen's arm and pulled him sideways just as a chunk of non-existent concrete materialized and crashed where he'd been standing. "This place is eating itself alive," she gasped, checking the data drive in her pocket for the 100th time. The drive contained everything. Proof of the facility's existence, the names of the thousands they'd erased, the quantum technology that made it all possible. It was their only chance to expose the truth before the entire installation collapsed into paradox. They rounded a corner and nearly collided with Dr. Vance. The facility's director stood in the hallway like she'd been waiting for them, her white lab coat pristine despite the chaos around them. But something was wrong with her face. It kept shifting, as if the quantum interference couldn't decide which version of her was real. "You don't understand what you're doing," Vance said, her voice echoing with harmonic distortions. "The people we process here, they're not innocent. They're threats to the timeline itself, causality violators. Their very existence creates paradoxes that could unravel everything." "Bullshit," Maya snarled, pulling out the pistol she'd taken from a security guard. "You're erasing whistleblowers and dissidents, people who threaten your corporate masters." Vance smiled, and for a moment, her face became translucent. "Am I? Check your drive, Ms. Torres. Really look at the files you think you're saving." Maya's blood chilled, but she kept the gun steady. "What are you talking about?" "The quantum resonance chamber doesn't just erase people from reality," Vance continued, stepping closer despite the weapon aimed at her. "It erases them from history. Every decision they made, every life they touched, every consequence of their existence, all of it gets retroactively unwoven. We've been saving the world from temporal paradoxes for 40 years. Chen grabbed Maya's free hand. "She's lying. It's manipulation. We've seen the evidence." "Have you?" Vance's form flickered more violently as another wave of quantum distortion swept through the corridor. Or, have you seen what we wanted you to see? Maya, dear, you were never supposed to escape that train. None of this was accidental. The words hit Maya like ice water. What? Your father didn't stumble onto our operation. He was recruited by it. Sebastian Torres was one of our best field agents, identifying causality violators for processing. But he got sentimental about one particular target. Vance's eyes fixed on Maya with predatory intensity. A brilliant young engineer whose future innovations would destabilize 3 different timelines. Maya's hand began to shake. No, he was trying to expose you. He died because he refused to bring you in, Vance interrupted. We've been watching you ever since, waiting for the right moment. Every person you've loved, every friend you've made, they've all been our assets, slowly guiding you here. Even Chen. Maya spun toward Chen, the gun now pointed at his chest. His face was a mask of guilt and anguish. Maya, he started. How long? She whispered. 3 years, he admitted, his voice breaking. They recruited me 3 years ago, but everything changed when I met you. I tried to protect you, tried to find another way. The corporate assassins? Rogue agents. Vance's people who wanted to process you immediately. I've been fighting them off, trying to buy time to find a solution. Another massive quantum wave shook the facility, and suddenly Vance was standing directly in front of Maya, her hand on the gun barrel. There is no solution, dear. You exist in 17 different timeline configurations, and in 14 of them, your work leads to reality cascade failures. The math is simple. Maya looked into Vance's shifting face and saw something that terrified her more than death. Absolute certainty. This woman truly believed she was saving the universe by erasing people from existence. Maybe, Maya said quietly, then smiled. But you made one mistake. What's that? You assumed I came here to stop you. Maya pulled the backup detonator from her jacket. I came here to make sure everyone knows you exist. Vance's eyes widened as she realized what Maya had done. The data wasn't just on the drive, it was broadcasting through every communication system in the facility, uploading to networks around the world, even as the quantum breach tore the place apart. Maya pressed the button, and the charges Chen had planted in the quantum core exploded with the fury of collapsing stars. The facility's emergency klaxons screamed through the corridors as Maya dragged an unconscious Dr. Henley toward the central archive chamber. Blood trickled from a gash on her forehead, but her grip on the access card remained steady. Behind them, the sound of jackboots echoed off metal walls, security forces converging on their position. How much further? Gasped Chen, his arm wrapped around a limping technician they'd forced to guide them. The woman's keycard had gotten them through the first 3 security checkpoints, but the deeper they ventured into the facility, the more desperate their situation became. 2 more levels, the technician wheezed. But you'll never make it. The quantum erasure process has already begun for your records. In 30 minutes, you'll cease to exist in any meaningful way. Maya felt a chill that had nothing to do with the facility's sterile air conditioning. They'd seen the erasure chamber during their infiltration, a massive sphere lined with quantum processors humming with otherworldly energy. Inside, holographic displays showed hundreds of records being systematically deleted: birth certificates, school records, employment history, even digital photographs and surveillance footage. People weren't just being killed here, they were being retroactively unmade. The freight train that had brought them to this nightmare sat abandoned on the tracks outside, its rusted cars a deliberate deception. What had appeared to be a forgotten rail line was actually a carefully maintained transport system, ferrying the disappeared to their final destination. The government had been perfecting this process for decades, and Maya and Chen had stumbled directly into its maw. There, Chen pointed down a corridor lined with server racks. The archive core. They burst through the final security door as gunfire erupted behind them. Maya shoved Dr. Henley's unconscious form against a control panel while Chen worked frantically at a terminal, his fingers flying across holographic interfaces. The technician cowered in the corner, her face pale with terror. "I'm in," Chen announced, sweat beading on his forehead. But the system is fighting back, some kind of adaptive security protocol. On the massive displays surrounding them, thousands of identities flickered like dying stars. Maya recognized some of the faces: journalists who had asked too many questions, scientists who had discovered inconvenient truths, ordinary citizens who had simply been in the wrong place at the wrong time. All of them erased, as if they had never existed at all. There, Maya spotted their own files among the cascade of data. Her entire life history was dissolving in real time: her childhood in Portland, her journalism degree, even her first kiss with Tommy Morrison behind the gymnasium. Each deleted memory felt like a physical blow. Chen's hands moved desperately across the controls, trying to halt the erasure process. The quantum entanglement is too deep. Every record is linked to dozens of backup systems. Even if we stop our deletion, they can restart it remotely. The sound of approaching footsteps grew louder. Maya grabbed a plasma rifle from one of the fallen guards, checking its charge. They had perhaps 2 minutes before the facility's forces overwhelmed their position. "Wait," the technician spoke up suddenly, her voice trembling. "There's another way. The Master Archive. It contains the original quantum signatures for everyone who's ever been processed. If you could access it, we could reverse the erasures," Chen finished, his eyes widening with understanding. "Restore everyone who's been deleted." Maya felt a surge of desperate hope. "Where is it?" "Sub-level 9. But it's suicide. That's where Director Walsh keeps his personal laboratory. The place is crawling with his enhanced security units." The door behind them exploded inward, and black-armored figures poured through the breach. Maya opened fire, her shots carving through the tactical formation. Chen continued working at the console, his face illuminated by streams of cascading data. "I've isolated our records," he shouted over the weapon's fire. "Bought us maybe 10 more minutes." Maya reloaded quickly, her mind racing. 10 minutes to reach sub-level 9, access the Master Archive, and somehow reverse decades of quantum erasure. It was impossible, but so had been surviving this long. The emergency shaft, the technician pointed to a maintenance hatch in the far wall. "It leads directly to Walsh's lab, but once you're down there, there's no way back up." Maya looked at Chen, seeing her own determination reflected in his eyes. They had started this journey as fugitives running for their lives. Now they had a chance to save not just themselves, but hundreds of others who had been erased from history. "Then we don't come back," Maya said, grabbing Chen's hand. "We end this." Together they plunged into the maintenance shaft as plasma fire scorched the air behind them. 9 levels down, Director Walsh was waiting, and with him the power to restore the disappeared, or to erase the last traces of their existence forever. The shaft walls flashed past in a blur of metal and shadow, carrying them toward their final confrontation. The facility's main server room hummed with the sound of dying machines as Sarah's fingers flew across the keyboard. Behind her, Marcus kept watch at the door while Dr. Voss worked frantically at a secondary terminal, his hands shaking as he uploaded decades of stolen memories back into the quantum storage matrix. "How much longer?" Marcus called out, his voice tight with urgency. Through the reinforced glass, they could see corporate security teams flooding the lower levels, their tactical lights cutting through the darkness like angry fireflies. "Almost there," Sarah replied, sweat beading on her forehead. The deletion algorithm was fighting her every step of the way, as if the facility's AI had developed a survival instinct of its own. "The system's trying to purge everything. It knows we're here." A massive explosion somewhere above them sent tremors through the floor. Dust rained from the ceiling as emergency lights bathed everything in hellish red. The train they'd abandoned in the tunnel below was now their only escape route, but first they had to complete the upload. Thousands of erased lives hung in the balance. "Sarah, we need to go," Marcus insisted, raising his stolen rifle as footsteps echoed in the corridor beyond. They've found us. 30 more seconds, she said through gritted teeth. The progress bar crawled forward with agonizing slowness, 87%, 88, 89. Each percentage point represented hundreds of people, parents, children, dissidents, whistleblowers, all of whom deserved to exist again. Dr. Voss looked up from his terminal, his face pale. The quantum field is destabilizing. If we don't get out of here in the next 2 minutes, the entire facility will collapse into a temporal paradox. Everyone inside will simply cease. The irony wasn't lost on any of them. The government's own erasure technology would consume its creators. There. Sarah slammed the enter key as the upload completed. Immediately, alarms began blaring throughout the facility. Somewhere in the world, thousands of people were suddenly remembering they existed, their identities restored to global databases, their families finally able to recall their faces. The door behind them exploded inward in a shower of sparks and metal. Corporate soldiers poured through the breach, their weapons raised, but before they could fire, the lights went out completely. In the absolute darkness, Sarah heard Dr. Voss whisper something under his breath, an activation code she'd seen him enter earlier. Emergency lighting flickered on, revealing chaos. Half the soldiers were stumbling around in confusion, their memory implants scrambled by the facility's dying systems. The others opened fire blindly, their bullets sparking off server towers and shattering screens. Marcus grabbed Sarah's hand and pulled her toward the maintenance shaft they'd identified earlier. Dr. Voss was right behind them, clutching a data drive containing backup files. They crawled through the narrow passage as the facility tore itself apart around them, the quantum field generators overloading in a cascade of technological suicide. They emerged in the tunnel where their freight train waited, its ancient engine somehow still running. As they climbed aboard, Sarah looked back at the facility one last time. Through the tunnel mouth, she could see the building flickering like a mirage, its existence becoming uncertain as the temporal paradox took hold. "Will it work?" she asked Dr. Voss as Marcus got the train moving. "Will they stay restored?" The old scientist nodded wearily. The upload was complete. Their quantum signatures are now scattered across thousands of servers worldwide. The government can't erase them again without destroying half the internet. He managed a weak smile. Sometimes the best way to hide something is to put it everywhere. The train picked up speed, carrying them away from the collapsing facility. Behind them, reality folded in on itself with a sound like thunder played backward. When Sarah looked over her shoulder, there was nothing there but empty desert, as if the government complex had never existed at all. Hours later, as dawn broke over the horizon, they finally allowed themselves to believe they'd won. The train rolled through abandoned countryside, following tracks that led back to civilization, real civilization, not the corporate-controlled cities they'd fled. Sarah's phone, miraculously still functional, began buzzing with notifications. News reports were already surfacing about people suddenly reappearing in family photos, about government officials scrambling to explain massive gaps in public records, about a mysterious facility that satellites could no longer locate. "So what happens now?" Marcus asked, settling beside her in the train car. Sarah looked at the data drive Dr. Voss had saved, knowing it contained evidence of decades of systematic erasure. "Now we make sure this never happens again." She smiled, feeling truly free for the first time in months. Besides, someone has to tell their stories. All those people who were erased, they deserve to be remembered. The freight train continued its journey toward an uncertain but hopeful future, carrying 3 fugitives who had become something more important, witnesses to the truth that could never again be deleted.